And I'm just putting my alarm on 10 minutes because that's what I've been given. So, good afternoon. As you know, my name is Zakia Elvang. I'm from Denmark. And I guess I'm casted as the practitioner perspective on this in this conversation on energy transition. And as I just talked to my group before, I mean, I'm not an energy expert. I'm a democracy expert. It's what I do. I design citizen engagement, and Christian and I had the privilege of working a bit together on the first Folkepanel in Norway that was organized last year. So I have some notes on citizen participation and where that field is going from a practitioner perspective, and I have kind of decided to focus a bit more on the citizen assembly part, even though there's a lot of other things you could focus on, because I think in this conversation that's probably what's going to bring us furthest. So just really briefly, so you know who I am, we are, hang on, let me just see how I can make this work. Maybe I need your help. There. We're a social enterprise. Half of the stuff we do together with foundations and externally funding, and half of it is more like working as regular advisors and consultants within the field. But all profit goes back into the topic. We are also, apart from running this organization called We Do Democracy, we also have founded and run a democracy innovation hub in Copenhagen called Democracy Garage. So if you're ever in Copenhagen, you're more than welcome. And it's 1,400 square meters of old car repair workshop where we drove the cars out and democracy in for a service check and renovation. So I think that probably says a lot about where I come from, a rather practical perspective on democracy. And just a starting point, I had a grandmother who's unfortunately dead now, but when she died, I inherited quite a large amount of her old wooden furniture, also a dresser. And I have that dresser. I loved her, and the stuff she had was beautifully made by Danish craftsmen and lovely wood and lots of Danish furniture tradition in these constructions. And this dresser is now in my living room, and it's actually quite annoying because it takes up too much space, and the drawers doesn't really open. You know, I don't know if you have stuff. You really have to to open them, and therefore the stuff I have in the dresser is something I don't really use because it's too unpractical to actually work with it, and so it's there. I inherited from someone who loved me and who wanted me to have a good life, but I can't really use it. And I think for me, where our democracy is almost the same state. We inherited from someone who did a good job. They actually wanted to build something that was useful for us, and there was a lot of craftsmanship and love put into the design of democracy. But if we don't nurture it, if we don't oil it, if we don't replace it, if we don't give it renovation, then it's going to be unpractical and unhelpful in the lives we live today. So we have kind of neglected to take a stand on what kind of democracy would actually suit us well in the times we live in now. And our democracy is, for large parts of it, is at least 150 years old. It was built in a time where, I wouldn't have been able to vote for one. There were no internet, there were no AI, there were also no political parties, by the way. There were no ideologies, there were no stakeholders, there were no interest organizations, there were no labor organizations. Tons of the stuff we do today we didn't have. And I imagine if you were a big private company and someone asked you, so how come you've chosen the governance model, the leadership model that you use, and you would say, yeah, we did this 150 years ago. And therefore, of course, we can't change it. You would look kind of ridiculous. I mean, you would expect that, of course, your job as a CEO would be to make sure that your company is run in a way that's actually working in the time we are in today. So, if I should kind of tattoo one thing on your arm from this now 8.5 minutes left, that would be it. If we want democracy to actually be able to help us solve some of the larger wicked problems, and we are facing a substantial amount of really, really seriously wicked problems today, we need to invest and renovate and rethink and redesign the democracy of today. Otherwise, we can't use it to solve some of the problems we're facing. So what are the problems? I mean, you are a very senior and scholarly group of people that know these things. But anyway, fewer and fewer people, citizens, are members of political parties. There's a growing distance. There's tons of measurements around that. So when Benjamin says, where is Benjamin in the room? Somewhere he left. I can tell him afterwards. So when he say that citizens don't want to be engaged, I very much think it's because they've previously been engaged in a way they don't trust. So therefore, when people ask them again, they will say, fuck yourself, really. So distrust of politicians, both distrust from politicians and citizens, but of course, also very much the other way around. I mean, there was a big European measurement made some years ago where it showed rather clearly that actually we talk a lot about citizens' distrust, but the politicians' distrust and citizens is actually bigger. So there's a both-way problem: polarization, pessimism. There's just been a new analysis made that a large part of our citizens actually feel hopeless. They don't think the future is going to be better. They think the future is going to be worse. For large part, under-informed public. I mean, we have a lack of quality in journalism, in media. AI is taking over. I mean, the just recent Norwegian election where we saw that for large parts the election was won by the people that were good at TikTok and YouTube. So we have some problems about where we get our knowledge and where we actually shape our opinion about what is happening. Short-term political solutions to difficult problems. I mean, I don't know with you, but I mean, if I should list 10 problems that I would really want us to solve, they would all be 100-year problems. None of them are something you can solve within 4 years. And our politicians are elected, so year one, they are like, woo, where am I? And how are we going to do this? And what's the new government? And what's the agenda now? Then they have 2 years to be productive, and then they go on election again. So basically, we kind of think that we can solve very, very long-term wicked problems within a 2-year span. And I mean, by all means, it's ridiculous. Weak common language about what democracy is. We've been running citizen engagement processes now for 10 years. We've asked an enormous amount of citizens, not only in Denmark, but also other countries in Europe about this. And when we ask people, what is democracy to you? Many of them would still luckily say that it's connected to election. But from there, the language becomes very weak. And it's very difficult to protect something and defend it and develop it if you don't have a language for it. And then last, unsystematic democracy innovation. So I would say if the energy transition field would want to do something well, you also invest in democracy. Not only in the energy transition part, but also in the democracy innovation part. So what is democracy? And then I'm going to be practical in a second. Hang on, I'm just going to check my time because it runs so fast. Good. Democracy is, of course, both a system-based democracy, it's also the everyday-based democracy. So when we talk about democracy in this context, we're not only talking about rule of law, what happens in government and parliament, we're also talking about what happens in everyday, where people interact, the way we talk to each other, the way we learn from each other, the way we take responsibility and debate, etc. in our daily lives. So the question is, how can we, within this state where democracy is today, how can we transform and tackle some of the really difficult problems we're facing? And that is, of course, cities and landscape and society. And some of the kind of existing models we've been spending, I don't know if I know you, Christian, you know it, but I don't know if the rest of you know this model. It's called the DAD model, which is, of course, a bit unfair on a woke agenda, but still. So the DAD model basically means that the existing way we engage the citizens would be to say a few group of people decide on something. Then they maybe engage a few people, and then they announce it, and then they defend it, and then they have to, and a lot of people get really angry, and then maybe you have to adjust a bit, and then you implement it. So the thing is, if you actually want to do stuff that's complicated, and we actually need the public to engage, you'd have to shift that around. So you engage more people early, and you decide together, which would mean you are more people also to stand by or back the solution, and therefore make the implementation easier and also supported by more people. So there's a kind of a structural, systematic problem in the way we organize citizens' participation, where we have to engage more people earlier and not only design something and then say, would this work for you? Because then they're not a part of the design. So what we see when we run citizen assemblies in Denmark is that we have, and I think Graham said that as well, if we invite open citizen hearings. So everyone who is interested in energy transition, please show up at the town hall for an open conversation on this policy. Then the people who shows up are either really pissed or very enthusiastic. You don't get kind of the regular kind of in-between group who are more like, I don't know really, maybe that's good, I don't know yet, maybe I have to learn a bit more before I decide what my stand is. You only get kind of the more extreme positions. And if that's the only room politicians can listen to citizens, then it's also rather obvious that they either get scared or get too radical in a way in the decision making. So the problem is what to do with the rest of them. And I think for us at least, and I've been working with citizen engagement for 30 years, both as a civil servant, as a think tank worker, as I have been a part of initiating a political party, all kinds of different things. And I think for me, the entry of citizens' assembly in my kind of more practical methodology has really shifted the work we do with citizens. So because the question is how to engage the rest of us. And for those of you who don't know, and I'm gonna jump to that now, a citizen assembly, how many of you know what a citizen assembly is? Can I see some hands? I want them high up. And that's only hugs for the rest of you. You still have a wonderful chapter to open. So a citizen assembly, boom, there's some examples here. A citizen assembly is based, there's some good principles that's been designed by OECD. I think Graham mentioned them as well. Very good to learn from. And a very, very kind of short list. A citizen assembly is commissioned by, often by governmental institutions, but as Graham mentioned here, there are also more radical versions where civil society or bottom-up organization initiate them, but the broad repertoire, the broad domain of this is initiated by governmental institutions. There's a clear mandate. There's a limited group of people that's in the room, and they are drawn by lot, which, for example, in Copenhagen, and that's the example I want to show you, you send out invitation to a broad population. For example, in a neighborhood in Copenhagen called Østerbro, we sent out 80,000 invitations on our digital e-box system. And all the people who said, yes, I would like to participate, and almost 2,000 people said yes. Among them, you draw a lot. And that means you make a lottery. And actually, there's a wonderful photo here I'm going to show you. That's from the German Bundestag, where they draw the lot, kind of literally draw the lot on television. There was more viewers on that than on the dance show later. So they draw a lot, and they draw a lot on certain specific criteria like gender and age and socio-economic dimensions. Or, for example, do you have access to a car, depending on what discussion the assembly is working on. And that process ensures that the citizens that are actually in the room is a mini public that mirrors the broader population. So instead of only talking to the very pissed people or the very enthusiastic people, you have a broad group of people that actually represents and mirror the broader population. And what we can see when we run these assemblies is that the recommendations that come out of it are more balanced, they are braver, they are more long-sighted, and actually often very sensible. And often when we ask politicians, how come you don't engage citizens in this? They're like, nah, they're gonna fuck it up. It's gonna be very difficult to implement. They're gonna suggest something very radical to tear down the state or something. But when we have citizens in the room, they're very sensible. Actually, very often when we compare the citizens' perspective on a problem with the politician's perspective, the citizens are more sensible. So what we can see is it's a very, very easy way to have a large group of people represented by a smaller group and come up with very practical and workable solutions on very complicated problems. And the thing is, there's a long tradition of different citizen assemblies. France, Germany, Belgium, Canada, Australia are far in this. And as we just talked about this morning, there's an interesting thing around why this wave has been rather slow in the Nordic part. Nordic part of the world, why the Scandinavian countries have been slow. And my theory is, and we have been relatively slow, our wave is kind of after the main wave in the rest of Europe, is that we are probably very, very self-complacent. We think our democracies are the best in the world. And we are like, yeah, poor Brazil, if only they had what Denmark have, and poor Africa, or poor whatever, if only they did what we do, they would be much better off. And of course it is, if you look at kind of more classical data, you would say we are living in very stable countries, we're welfare states, few people get shot on the streets, we have rule of law, there's stuff that actually works. So that self-complacence also is, of course, also coming from somewhere. It's coming from countries that in many ways are well-functioning. But the cracks that we have in our democracies are the same as everywhere else. And when they then show up, then we are like, ooh, where did that come from? That big problem in democracy, but the cracks have been there long. And I think that self-complacency has brought us to a place where we become lazy and not very curious and very unwilling to learn from what other countries do. And that's creating some of the problems we're facing now in our countries. So jumping to this one, 2 minutes on this, because it's a very specific example. The first citizen assembly, which was the kind of full-scale citizen assembly in Denmark, was 6 years ago. That's me in a slightly younger version. In Copenhagen municipality, which was commissioned by the municipality of Copenhagen. And the problem in Copenhagen, as in many cities, is that we have too many cars, we have too many parking lots, and we have too little space for green and living and whatever. And the politicians in 50 years at the city hall have been debating what to do about it, and no one dared to decide on it because they were afraid to get punished at the next elections by the people that owned a car. So no one really dared to do anything. So it's really kind of a stuck situation where they needed to do something, but they didn't dare to do it. And then we hosted this citizen assembly commissioned by the city council, where the question was, how can we design a city that's livable in the future with less cars and less traffic driving through Copenhagen? And this is the lottery we drawed, and all the representation was done, one of the things we could, for example, see was that if we looked at the municipality, 74% had no access to car. The people who registered, who wanted to take part in the citizen assembly, only 37% had access to car. So if we had just made an open invitation, it would have been a car-driving dominant assembly, because we made the lottery, it was the real people in the room actually mirrored the representation in the city, which of course meant quite a lot for the recommendations they were producing. Then they had some scenarios that was built and designed by scientists based on what we know about how cities can develop. And then they worked together, they deliberated, they had experts coming by, that whole flow of different things, and this was the recommendations that came out. So the interesting thing is here that they voted for up to 75% reduction of car traffic and 80 to 90% reduction of the parking lots at street level in Copenhagen, which was much more than the city council had been suggesting and that they dreamt of doing. So on the basis of this recommendation came back to the city council, and then the city council did some prototyping and some more practical tests of what could work. And then last year, they voted for the adoption of the recommendations of the Citizen Assembly, which meant that we ended up reducing 66% of cars and parking places in the inner part of Copenhagen based on that recommendation. And at least from a Copenhagen perspective, this is quite radical. I mean, I guess Danes have the same love affair with their cars as Norwegians have. So taking away parking lots in Copenhagen seems like a rather radical thing to do. So what we can see is, we see that deliberative democracy, it's a way of creating political participation without party membership. It's a way of actually orchestrating rooms where regular citizens can take a stand on where they want us to go without having to vote for a specific political party. It's a way of filtering from raw opinions into more kind of refined and thoughtful public judgment. If you just ask a big poll, what would you say to energy transition in Norway? Then you would get some raw data back. This is a way of filtering it, where you give the citizens data and knowledge and science and time to deliberate, and therefore the judgment they come up with is much more refined and more thoughtful. It's a way of shifting, on a very, very specific level, shifting citizens' opinions on very difficult issues from one position to another. We ran one assembly in Copenhagen on EU policy, and 50% of the participants was like really hardcore against any kind of EU membership in Denmark. And after the assembly was done, 95% was actually for a European cooperation, but on certain conditions. So they really shifted their position on the question. And then lastly, it's a way for the system to listen to citizens without pandering populism. It's a way of actually having and setting an ear to the public, saying we're very, very, very interested in what you say and what your view would be without becoming populist. So for us, at least, this is one of the solutions or one of the answers to some of the more hardcore democratic problems energy transition, in my eyes, is also gonna face. Yeah, I think that's already much too long time.